Hello, welcome to Fit and Fabulous with me, Dr. Orlena. I'm super excited today because we're going to be talking all about bone health and bone strength as we get older. I'm super excited to welcome Tracey Clissold. Hello and welcome all the way from New Zealand.
Thank you so much, Dr. Orlena. Yeah, I'm excited too. I'm 5 a.m. in the morning right now, so hopefully
Oh my goodness, I didn't realize it was quite so early. I knew it was morning, but I didn't realize it was. So thank you so much for getting up.
I get up early. I love the morning, but daylight savings has put
Perfect.
us into darkness at this time now. But normally I'd be out having a
Oh.
run or having a surf or something like that.
Oh, surfing sounds lovely. We were talking about the ocean before we started recording, but I live on the Mediterranean, and if you're a mouse, you might be able to surf when it's windy, but otherwise, there's no surfing here. It's flat as a pancake. And I always joke in the middle of the summer, it is literally like a mill
Yeah.
pond. And then sometimes there's waves, and my friends are all like, we can't swim when there's waves.
Oh,
And I'm like,
really?
look, I'm swimming.
Different lives. There's pros and cons, isn't there? But
Yeah, so I would love to surf, but yeah, clearly just not happening here. So yeah, before we start, tell us about what are your, I call them activities that light you up. So your movement that lights you up. What are they for you?
running's my number one. So I love running, and running been a lot of my sort of history. And I've run marathons for probably
Wow.
about 30 years or so, and represented New Zealand as a marathon runner. So I've won most of the New Zealand marathons and some Australian marathons and a few other internationals. So that was my 20s and 30s. But I love running still. I'm not a fast runner now, but I love running off trail, heading up Mount Maunganui, which is called Mowal. It's a lovely little place right on the ocean. So I like to do that and run along the beach and in the bush. So it gives me my absolute, it's my happy place. So running is
Yeah,
great.
exactly.
Mm.
Your movement that
Oh,
lights
it
you up. And I can
does.
tell really, I think everybody needs a movement that lights you up. And I know that we should have certain movements for doing certain things. And one of them we're going to talk about today. But I just
Yeah,
think when you have a movement that lights you up, it's just so easy to do.
yeah,
You look forward to it and plan your life around it
yeah.
and make it your number one thing. And it just becomes easy. Okay. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do and who you are, just so people
Sure.
know?
Okay. I have been an academic lecturer for around 30 years, so a long time now that I look back on that journey. So I've taught at a lot of different universities over my time, and my areas of expertise are sports nutrition. So I love working with athletes and teams and coaches, exercise physiology, so exercise science, and also population health and well-being type papers as well. So that's the area that I've taught historically and
Fabulous.
in the you know now as well. I do research as well. So I've had a really interesting research journey. So my what we're going to talk about today, the women's bone health, is a real passion research area for me. So that's another, I suppose, career part of who I am. I'm also an ex-athlete and I've got two beautiful children. So I have a big boy. My son Taylor Blue is 24 and my daughter
Wow.
Daisy is 12. So I
Oh,
have
like
a little
middle.
one as well, a little hip hop dancer. So yeah, I have a pretty busy life trying to manage all of those things. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. Perfect. And I think that's who we're speaking to today, somebody who is busy. Like most people are busy. My goodness, we could talk about so many things, but we're going to talk about bone health today because it is super, super important. And it's super important for lots of reasons. But partly what we're looking at is leading a long and healthy life and feeling vibrant as we get
Yeah.
older. So, can you just talk a little bit about the natural progression of what happens? Like, why is it important that we pay attention to our bone health?
Yeah, I suppose one of the really important reasons is because it's a silent epidemic. So we don't really know that our bones are getting weaker and we're losing bone mineral density. And we have a finite amount of time to grow our bone. So we really only have 30 years to grow the bone that in the skeleton that's going to see us out for the rest of our lives. And a lot of people don't know that. And I suppose
I didn't
yeah,
know
if we
that.
peel that back even further, we say actually for women, we've grown most of our skeleton by the time we're 18 years of old. So about 92% of our entire bone mineral density is laid down by the age of 18. And then we've got us up to the age of 30 to top that up. And we're probably
Okay.
not that motivated in those years to actually build that skeleton and to invest in our bone health future, I suppose you could say. And then from 30 to 50, so basically once we reach peak bone mass, right up until menopause, we start slowly losing bone, about 0.5% of our total bone mineral density a year, up to the age of about 51, which is considered the average age of menopause. And then at menopause, we start to have this massive loss of bone. The average woman over the 5 to 7 years of menopause can lose 20% of her entire bone mineral density.
Wow.
So that acceleration of bone loss ties into the fact that estrogen is withdrawn at that time, and it plays a really important role in bone health. And I suppose, yeah,
And
sorry.
yeah, go
I was
on.
going to say that the other little issue, I suppose, that weighs in there is that if women suppress their menstrual cycle during those years where they're growing that bone, that can also have a detrimental effect on that skeleton that they have to last them the rest of their lives. So, someone who is suffering from amenorrhea, so if they have maybe got into low energy availability for some reason, and we know that's quite prevalent in society, then that also can have a negative impact on your bone health.
Okay. And just going back to bone density and thinking, okay, so we haven't got enough bone density. Why is that important? What are the consequences of not having
Yeah.
enough
So
bone
bone mineral
density?
density tells a big part of the bone strength story. So it's not everything, but it's a big part of it. It's maybe 70% of the strength of our bone. And so what happens is once we actually start to lose that mineral out of the bone, we become more susceptible to fracture. And so that's what happens. And we have these terrible statistics in the Western world that say 1 out of 3 women, or sorry, 2 out of 3 women can suffer an osteoporotic fracture from the age of 60. And the stats aren't so bad for men. It's more like 1 in 5. And some of the worldwide stats say 1 in 20 for men. So it really is an issue and a disease state and a risk for women more than men. And that osteoporotic fracture, that can be really debilitating. And we know that hip fracture, which is probably the most debilitating, people can not recover from that. They may not recover their independence. And people
Yeah,
don't know they have poor bone health until they
yeah.
fall and fracture. So,
Yeah, and then it can be like this downward
yeah,
spiral. It's not like when you're younger and you break a bone and
yeah,
then you're on crutches for a
yeah,
little bit and then you get better and then you might have some consequences afterwards, but generally bones heal when you're
yeah,
younger. When you're older, it can be that trigger of downward
yeah,
spiral and downward spiral in terms of
mm,
all of your health and well-being
yeah,
and independence
yeah.
and just not
No,
goodness.
that's right. Yeah. And it's something that I've heard others describe as a 30-year journey fueled by reduced bone mineral density and increased risk of fracture that terminates in this fracture situation. But we don't know. It might be 60 when we have that fracture, but remember 30 is when
Yeah.
we've reached our peak bone mass. So it's that slow loss, and most people aren't doing anything about that. And that's mainly
Yeah.
because they don't know there's things they can do about that. And so it's really about empowering people about what can you do to minimize those risks and have a fantastic, fabulous life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect. Exactly.
Mm.
And that's what we're going to talk about. Before we talk about what people can do in terms of movement, you talked about
Yeah.
menopause and estrogen being an important factor in this. So are people who go on HRT, are they protected slightly or not?
There's not a lot of research in this space. And what I have read, so it's not my area of expertise in there is potential, absolutely. Because if you're thinking, what's the missing piece of the puzzle? What are one of the missing pieces of the puzzle is estrogen. So if you're providing that sort of exogenously, then yeah, it definitely can help to minimize or to sticking plaster one of the major issues, which is that withdrawal of estrogen. So estrogen basically blocks the breaking part of the bone remodeling cycle. So that's the role that HRT could play, especially if it's estrogen focused, because not all HRT is the same.
Okay. Yeah, so sometimes it's estrogen and
Mm.
progesterone. So you want, as long as you've got some estrogen in there,
Yeah,
you're okay, or potentially
potentially.
okay. Not okay, but potentially you're giving yourself a benefit, shall we say, a grain of sand,
Yeah.
shall we say.
And that's the thing, I suppose, and I'm not an expert in that in the pharmacology field, but certainly one of the things that needs to be weighed up is how people tolerate medications as well. So
Yeah.
all I have expertise in is green prescription, so manipulating exercise, nutrition, those sorts of things. But obviously, there's a chance for cumulative effect on top of those things if we can get right as
Okay.
well.
So should we quickly talk about nutrition? If you give us
Sure.
the nutshell of like what we're looking for in
Okay.
nutrition?
So, I mean, there's three things really that are important from a nutrition perspective for bone. And the first one we have to really talk about is calcium. So, calcium is the mineral that makes up our bone. So, if we're not getting enough calcium in our daily, then that can be a factor that's going to interfere with our ability to grow optimal bone and to reach that peak bone mass in that first 30 years, and then to minimize losses as we age. Getting enough foods that contain calcium. So, dairy products, plant-based milks that are fortified with calcium, nuts and seeds, green leafy vegetables. So we know that calcium can be achieved, like the recommended daily intake, but whether women are doing that. And what we do know from existing surveys is in most cases, women aren't getting enough calcium. So they might only be getting
Really?
maybe 70% of what they need. And that, again, is something that we need to address. We can take calcium as a supplement. There have been.
But we prefer not supplements. We prefer not to take
That's right,
supplements.
yeah. Or some kind of people take things like supplements that are bone, or for calcium, it's bone or it's muscle shells. That's what calcium is. It's a structure of things that exist in nature. So it's finding something natural that can help us with that calcium. But we can do it
And
before.
how much
Yeah.
calcium do you, how much calcium do you recommend a
1,000
day?
milligrams a day is really what we want.
Okay.
But once we're over 50, that actually goes up to about 1,500 milligrams, which is really quite difficult. You have to be quite purposeful in trying to achieve that. If people tolerate dairy products and then having more milk and yogurt and those sorts of things, cheese, and like I said, the nuts and seeds. If you're plant-based, one of the issues can be that the milks that you switch out for may not be fortified with calcium. So you have to read the label and make sure
Yeah.
that you've got the same amount of calcium. So you're wanting to get
Yeah.
about 300 milligrams per sort of typical cup of milk. And that's what you can achieve with either of those options. But yeah,
I will be checking my soya
yeah,
milk when I do eat
yeah,
dairy as well. And one thing I really like actually is quark. I don't know if everybody has quark,
yeah,
but it's a bit like
yes,
yogurt, but everyone always talks about yogurt as being high protein. In Spain, Greek yogurt is not high
yeah,
protein. And so quark
yes,
has got a little bit more protein
yeah.
in it.
It's a lot more.
But I will go and check
Yeah,
my soy milk.
definitely check it. And I think you bring up a good point about the protein. There's so many more products that are protein fortified now. So a lot of our yogurts are high protein yogurts, and that's definitely a good focus for women. So what we know also is that as we age, we start to atrophy our muscles as well as our bones. And so getting enough protein in our diet should be a real focus for us as we age. And
Yeah.
it's something that women just aren't getting right. And we know there's some fantastic literature out there, like Dr. Stacey Sims's first authored position statement that talks about how important protein is, that we should be aiming for around the high level of what is the recommendation for everyone. We usually think men need more protein than women, but relatively women need more protein than men. So
Yeah.
sort of getting towards that sort of 2 grams per kg of body weight a day of protein is a real good focus and target for women, and getting.
I'm just trying to work out my weights.
Yeah,
I normally say 30 grams per kilo. Sorry, 30 grams per meal,
okay.
which works out about 90. So I think I say that just because it's easy for
Yeah,
people to remember, but obviously
yeah,
that isn't specific to your body
yeah.
weight.
Around that, maybe between 1.5 and maybe 2.2 grams per kg body weight is a good sort of target based on best practice sports nutrition. But
Yeah.
yeah, most people will be falling short of that, and thinking about how to actually spread that over the day as well. So not just having
Yeah.
protein in the evening meal, but getting doses of around that 20 grams of protein in each.
And talking about protein, when we're plant based, I'm personally
Yeah.
plant based. Is there a difference between plant proteins and meat proteins? And can we get our protein requirement by eating plants? Not necessarily entirely by eating plants, but by that being a contributing an
You
amount.
absolutely can. So plant-based is just as effective as and not plant-based, but there is a difference between the proteins. So the proteins in the animal kingdom are considered complete in terms of their essential amino acids. So those sort of 8 or 9 amino acids our body can't make. We can get that easily in the ratios that sustain life and growth from animal proteins like your eggs and your meat and your dairy products, those sorts of things. But in plant based, we actually just have to get better combinations of things. So there are.
Rice and
Yeah,
beans.
so beans are fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. And quinoa is a grain that's considered to be essentially complete. But most things that we eat in the plant kingdom are just missing one of those essential amino acids, or the ratios are slightly out in terms of being called complete. But all we need to do is throw a couple of plant proteins together, and then we
Yeah.
get that completeness. Or over the day, we just eat different plant proteins, and then we get
Okay.
that completeness. So yeah, it's absolutely possible. Yeah. Probably the only other
Okay.
thing
Perfect.
is if you're looking at doses of things like your protein powders and things, if it's a whey protein powder, then that's the amount that you need to add is less than what you'd have to add for a soy isolate or any other kind of pea protein that you might have.
So I have a vegan protein, but it's a
Yep.
mixture of different things, and I hoped that meant that it would have different things, so
Yep.
it would be a complete
Absolutely.
protein. Well, I have to confess, I haven't
Yeah. Yeah.
checked. So perhaps I have to confess, I find it difficult to read the labels these days.
And aren't labels terrible? Like they don't actually make it
They're
conducive to
so
read.
tiny.
So that's something that we could do better, isn't it? Because if we're asking people to be vigilant and read their labels, yet half the time you can't even find the label on a product. So you actually have
Yeah,
to be
exactly.
purposeful. And yeah, you have to do it a couple of times and then you don't have to keep doing it once you've.
But if you can
Mm,
choose, whey is better. If you want to go for the vegan ones, then you
yep,
can. Like you might want to do that for ethical
yep.
reasons. But the whey one is basically better if you can go for
I
whey.
don't know if I would say it's better. I think once you have it in that the vegan or vegetarian form, it's already designed to be perfect, but you might
Okay.
have to take
Yeah.
25 grams instead of 20 grams, and that's what the dose will be
Okay.
anyway. So it's already sorted
Okay.
out for you. So either way, it's going to be beneficial to your body. Yep,
Okay,
yep,
perfect. So we've got
yep.
calcium and protein. Is protein specifically for bones, or was there
Yeah,
something else to
protein
talk
is
about for bones?
definitely important for bones. So every part of our body is protein. So collagen is our bone, it's made from protein. We do need to make sure that we're ticking off the right amount of protein. And I think bones and muscles go very nicely together, our musculoskeletal system. And one of the things that our bones need is the muscle pull on bone. So if we're aging and we're still getting good muscle pull on our bone, that's all connected to protein. So I think, and for women, we know we don't have a lot of enough muscle in most cases, and our muscle dictates our metabolic rate, so the calorie cost of living. And as we age, we lose that muscle, and most women aren't using their muscles enough. So we're
Yeah,
losing that muscle as we age. That's affecting our need for calories, and then our body composition changes as we age. So protecting our
yeah.
muscle is indirectly protecting our bone, and it's also helping us to
Okay,
age fabulously. So
perfect.
yeah,
Okay. So did you say there were three things for
yes, so the
nutrition?
other one is vitamin D. So vitamin D
Vitamin
is
D. Okay.
absolutely vital to that metabolism of bone as well. And that's something that we get predominantly from the sun. So the sun synthesizes the vitamin D we need in our skin, but that's our UVB rays. And of course, that's something that also is connected to risk for skin cancers and things like that. There's a couple of things that we have to weigh up there is most people are trying to keep out of the sun because of the risk of things like aging and skin cancer and all that sort of stuff. But we need a certain amount, a dose, to be able to produce that vitamin D. And it might be that it's in a hot climate, only 6 to 7 minutes a day over about 15% of our surface area of our skin. And that can just be our face and neck and arms, but not with sunscreen on. So the sunscreen blocks
Yeah,
that UVB. So, if we can get that sun at sensible times, pre 10 and post 4, and depending on where you live, so that might not be practical in some climates. But in the winter, we actually need up to 2 hours of sun on our skin to get the same amount. And so, therefore, what we're finding is that people aren't getting enough in the summer to ride them out through the winters. And there's more and more incidents of vitamin D deficiency in countries that have plenty of sun. It's something we need to think about, and maybe it's a more difficult one to navigate for some people, but you can also get vitamin D from food. But it's in food that
yeah.
contains fat, so it's a fat soluble vitamin. So you'll get it in things like your egg yolk and your full fat dairy products and things like that. But whether people are consuming enough in food, that might be an issue. So it's
And what about supplements? Do supplements help?
absolutely. So a lot of people will take, especially elderly people, will be given supplements for vitamin D. So that is a possibility. but not having enough vitamin D in your system can negate some of the other things that we're talking about as being necessary for bone health. So all of those things need to be in line. And maybe if you are unsure and people are living in climates where they're not getting enough or any exposure, because people spend so much time inside now too,
Yeah.
because their leisure activities are device based and those sorts of things. They're not
Yeah.
getting enough of that sort of outdoor life. Just checking it, getting a blood test to look at what your vitamin D status is. It could be good.
Perfect.
Mm.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So that's nutrition. Now moving on to favorite
Yep.
topic,
Yep.
movement. How can we look after our
Yep.
bones and stop this decline by movement?
Yes. Okay. Exercise is great. All exercise is wonderful, but not all exercise is osteogenic. So not all exercise stimulates the bone. And so what we know is that bone actually needs mechanical strain to be optimal and to hold on to that bone mineral density and even to increase that bone mineral density. So a lot of my research was first diving into literature that already existed, and some of the information was 100 years old. So Wolff's Law talks
Oh,
about
wow.
how mechanical strain is absolutely vital to bone. And so I was initially doing my due diligence and finding out all this fantastic information and realizing that there's this potential for us to have way better bones and to improve our bone health at a time where our physiology textbooks will tell us that we just lose it. But this stimulus that the bone needs has to satisfy some criteria to be able to switch bone on. And one of them is that we need some impact. We need some forces translated through the skeleton to the tune of around 3 body weights or more. And so then you look at the recommendations that are out there for bone health and it says weight bearing. And so a lot of people think that they're getting the forces through their skeleton that they need through doing things like walking. And walking is fantastic, obviously a fantastic means of exercise, but it's not enough force to turn bone on. So we actually need targeted forces through our skeleton. We don't need a lot of them. And that's the thing. The program that I've designed that I rolled out in clinical trials with my participants took them 2 to 3 minutes. So they did these exercises while their kettle was boiling. So while they were waiting for to have a cup of tea.
That's what sold me on your app. I was like, I can do this while the kettle's boiling.
Absolutely. And the thing is, these exercises, they're not to be like these landings that I coach people through on my app. They are not landings to be done all the time. The way we're normally taught to land is, so from a jump, for example, is to bend everything, to bend our knees, bend our hips, and absorb the forces. And we attenuate those forces in our muscles. We don't take any of those forces in our bones when we land like that. And that's the perfect way to land for sport and most of the time. But we actually need some stiffer, more bone jarring forces to switch bone on. And that can be done relatively easily and safely. And the changes that my women had from just adding these exercises into their daily lives, so doing it at work, so getting up from, if you're desk based, up from your desk, taking your shoes off, then doing these exercises 2 to 3 minutes, and then getting on with your day. You don't have to have any special equipment. You don't have to go to the gym. You don't have to have a shower. All those things that may be barriers for women to put exercise into their lives don't exist for this. I'm not saying that my bone health program is going to tick the boxes for everything. I still want you to do all the other exercise you do, the things that light you up, like you talked about at the beginning. But by integrating these simple jump landings into your life, you can have a significant improvement in bone mineral density. So my women gained 3 to 5% bone mineral density at the clinical site. So the hip, the lumbar.
That's like 5 to 6 years worth of loss, really.
Exactly. But you've got,
Well, if
yes,
you're losing 0.5% a year and
absolutely.
you're gaining,
Absolutely. So if you think about what the normal losses are and add that on to the fact that you're actually gaining and not losing, that makes those gains better. That makes
yep, totally. So you're not
you're
losing
gaining. You're
your,
gaining.
yeah,
And
perfect.
it's yeah.
And so just I want to ask you some questions about your app and get you to tell everyone about your app. But before I
Yeah.
do that, just thinking about how we jump around naturally. So
Yeah.
sometimes if you're playing racket
Yes.
sports or if you're
Yep.
doing a hit workout, like it depends what you're
Yeah.
doing in terms of
Yeah.
hit. Some of them you are jumping around a
Yes.
lot. Is that helping in terms of your bone health, or is that not
It
sufficient?
absolutely is helping. Yeah. So anything, and racket sports are great because they, in many cases, you're satisfying the magnitude of force, the rate of force, but also the novelty of the way that the forces are applied. Those are all things the bone loves. So those sorts of spontaneous activities are really good. But some of the things that can get in the way of your bones still receiving those forces are things like shoes. So shoes will absorb a
Yeah,
lot of the forces. And the other is that in many cases, we still are bending and absorbing the forces. So, yes, people
yeah,
like tennis players, squash players, netball players, people that are playing on hard surfaces and taking those forces will get, they will celebrate those bone mineral density benefits. But often what we find is that as we get older, we stop actually doing a lot of that sort of force production.
that
We start to
jarring
move
movement.
more into low impact. So we think as we age, we need to go low impact because we want to protect our joints and those sorts of things. And I'm totally on board with that because I don't want to do things that exacerbate joint injury. Participating in those sorts of sports is great, but just integrating these kinds of like something like this program can actually just be an addition to and not making you
Yeah.
more vulnerable to some of those articular joint issues that you might be susceptible to.
And what if you already have joint pain? So
Yeah,
I've chatted to people and said, you need to be doing some jumping. And they're like, but I've had a hip operation, or I haven't got any cartilage in my
yeah,
knee. What about those people? How can they improve their
yeah.
joint, their bone
Yeah.
density?
So that's a really good point. I don't know. I think everybody is an N of one. What I recommend people to do is that don't assume that you can't do it. You do need to try and be conservative initially to see how you tolerate those landings. And it may not be for you. It may not. And so therefore it's thinking about other ways of applying those forces that don't involve maybe a jump phase. So we have exercises in that we've also been researching that don't have a jump phase. So things like a heel drop and a stomp can be really effective, and people can hold on to something while they do these things if they have balance or coordination issues. If you're telling people to do jumps, and I did my research in premenopausal women, so my women were under 50, but it can be done at any age as long as you can do it safely and you can tolerate those landings. So I suppose that's a really important point. You don't just start putting these big forces through your skeleton and now your knees sort of blowing up and you don't just keep doing it. You need to trial and error and see whether you can tolerate. But there's definitely indication that people that have low bone mass, like osteopenia, pre-existing osteoporosis, can still benefit from doing these jump landings. It's probably more the joint conditions that are going to prevent people from being able to do it, as opposed to having low bone mass. So research, not my research, but we are moving into that space. So we're going to roll out this program with people with osteopenia in that postmenopausal age group to see what we can do, because the pre-existing literature suggests that it's not possible to gain bone mass postmenopausally, but you can blunt the losses. So that's a gain, that's a gain
Okay.
in itself. But even myself, I've rolled out the program and measured my own data already postmenopausal, and I had benefits of 3% at my hip and spine. So I benefited,
Oh,
and
wow.
that's in addition to running. So you think, are you getting enough forces when you're running? No, you're not. Because the way we run, we're very economical and we're attenuating those forces. We're probably only getting 2 to 3 body weights of force while we run. We need more than 3. So even people that are doing things that they think are applying those forces, you need to actually do some bone targeted landings, like 2 to 3 minutes, in addition to what else you're doing. And that will have a benefit on your bone that the other exercise is not able to get. So you get all the other benefits from the other exercise, obviously the metabolic, cardiovascular, feel good stuff. That's vital, but you're probably missing that piece, and that's the bone piece. And so that's where we have to actually be focused on that and do that in a really, targeted sort of setting.
Perfect. So I think, unless you have anything else to say, move on to your app.
Yeah, cool.
But I'm going to tell people about your app because I have your
Oh,
app.
that's awesome.
So I will tell people my experience of using
Yeah,
your app, and then if you have anything else. So I got your app. It's super easy,
yeah,
which
awesome.
is like seriously, I was thinking about this and thinking, do I really need an app that is going to tell me how to jump. And then it said, you can do this whilst you're boiling the kettle. And I was like, okay, I want to see what this app is all about. And it is super, super easy. And it just teaches you how to do jumping. It sends you reminders, which I have to remember to go and calibrate.
Yeah.
Now, what I didn't realize when I got it was that you had to take your shoes off.
Yes.
And so I've done it a little bit. And I have to
Yeah.
confess, we're just about to come into summer.
Awesome.
I was super lazy. And I'm like, I'm going to do this in summer because it's going to be so much easier to just take off my shoes and do the jumping and then build up that habit.
Yes.
So in a nutshell, it is super easy, just really super easy, basically. I do have one question, which is when you go through them, you do a jump and then you say to rest. And I don't know whether that is, I'm just like, oh, can I just do all the jumps at one? Can I just jump, jump, jump? Or do I need to rest?
Great questions. And yeah, you're right, it is super easy. And they are just coaching videos that take you progressively into more technical types of jumps. But I'm just going to clarify that it's actually not about the jumping, it's about the landing. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
And so that's where people have gone wrong. People know they have to do, maybe people know they need to do jumps, but they don't know how to land. That's the key. And that's what the app does, is it teaches you how to land and cues you for that landing. And these are exercises that we've quantified over a couple of years. Even though it seems so easy, it actually is, it's very precise in its prescription. So the fact that you rest is because the bone saturates very quickly and needs time to re-sensitize to receive the next stimulus. And that's why things like skipping, for example, are great, but not ideal for bone health, because the bone doesn't want that constant. It wants a couple of big loading cycles and then it needs to rest. Then you try it again. So I agree, because I'm an active person. I'm frustrated by having to rest. And so one of the next iteration of our app is going to have some things to do that are actually also about reduction of
stretches.
That's right. So some balance activities and coordination activities that also will cumulatively add up to reducing falls risk.
I'm hopeless. When I go to the gym, I have to go look at your watch, wait for your heart rate to come down, go and rest. I have to force myself to do it. So when I have this, I'm like, okay, I have to do, I can't remember how many jumps it is, 5 or landings. 5 landings. Can't I just do landing, and then get on and make the tea?
And it is,
it's
great that you say that, because people be thinking that, but it is incredibly purposeful. And this is coming from a literature that's potentially 100 years old, and animal studies and understanding bone physiology. That's what's gone into this very simple thing. So the fact that it can be rolled out and you can say, wow, this is so simple, and it is, but it's based on exactly what you need to do to actually get these benefits. So if you can stick to the script, then you will celebrate the benefits that you're due for your dedication to doing it. The app is, in saying it's 2 to 3 minutes, each of the short videos is maybe 4 minutes long, with the rests integrated and a little bit of coaching in there as well. But what we recommend is that people, especially people that aren't physically active currently, is that they do the preconditioning program. So it's a 4-week program that's a little bit more than 2 to 3 minutes. So it's like your insurance policy for being strong enough and ready and safe enough to be able to tolerate those jump landings. It involves strengthening and conditioning your legs, your core, your butt, and your back. And so it's really about getting you nice and strong and getting you also familiar with doing some just simple submaximal jumps before you start to do these stiff landings. And a lot of people over 30, over 40, over 50, you say, when was the last time you did some jumping? And they'll say, wow, I can't even remember. It was probably
when it was 8.
Exactly. So starting to practice just doing some simple jumps can be quite challenging for people to do. And that's why the 4-week program that sits before you even start doing the jump landing program is really vital for just getting you prepared and getting your body ready. And that's what I did with my research participants, because they came from a cross section of physical activity. Some were completely sedentary and some were active. But it's really for anyone. If you're an elite athlete, you still need to do this jump landing program. Or if you're completely sedentary, you're going to benefit. And so everybody benefited across that spectrum. And really, when you peel it back, you go, nobody's doing this. No one's putting these forces through the skeleton just accidentally in life. We actually have to
Yeah.
purposefully do it, but we have to do it safely. We have to think about how we're landing, and then we don't land like that the rest of the time. We do what our
Yeah.
bodies will naturally do, which is bend and absorb the forces because that's safe for our joints. Yeah,
Perfect. And it's not an expensive app as well. I know some apps you can get caught into like these
yeah,
subscriptions and you have to pay monthly and we have to think about how we're spending our money. But
yeah,
I can't remember how much it was. It was
yeah.
like, I think 20 euros or something like
Okay.
that. I
Yeah.
presume the price might change,
The
but
price is pretty
I don't know.
set. We'd love to offer this app for free because that's why I did my PhD in the first place. Was I was frustrated. I wanted to share this information to every woman on the planet and say that you can do something about your bone health. We're in this terrible end of the statistics. But yeah, myself and my academic supervisors have invested our own money into this, and developing an app is
Yeah.
not free. We're trying to
No,
work with different organisations who are in the business of public health to try and get the ability to offer this app for free. But it is a little bit naive of me as an academic.
right. 'Cause here's what happens in the
Yeah,
UK. So I'm in Spain, but my mother is in the UK, and she says if you have a DEXA scan that shows that you have low mineral density, they give you a subscription to the gym. And I think that's a little bit backwards. Why don't they give everyone a
yeah,
subscription to the gym? And then
yeah,
nobody needs to
yeah.
have low mineral density because they're looking after it. But I do think people and healthcare systems are beginning to
Yeah.
change
Mm,
and become
yeah.
aware that our lifestyle is really important. And actually, if or if healthcare systems invest in teaching people how to lead a healthy life, they're actually going to
Yeah.
save
Oh,
money in the long
you're
run.
absolutely right. And the price of the app is 24.99 US. So whatever that
Okay.
translates to in
Good.
euros, that's a year of having access to the preconditioning program, the 52-week jump program, all our educational other videos about nutrition and other things you can do. So that's where we are with the app, and we're also working to further develop it. So we've already got such
Amazing.
exciting plans for the next 12 months. And saying that it's a 12-month program, we actually can never stop imparting stress to our skeleton, what we can tolerate. And that may change based on our pre existing injuries, conditions, balance, all those sorts of things. But we just have to do what we can in terms of providing forces through the skeleton. And
Yeah.
I'm excited about being able to share even just the education piece with people to say, hey, look, there's something you can do. Because at the moment, like you say, it's really frustrating that people, A, don't know they maybe have pre existing issues. Like the people that are at risk most are people who are women that are over 50 and that are Caucasian or Asian. So those are our risk
Yeah.
factors, and people that aren't doing a lot of sort of impact type activity. Those are other things that maybe we do know or we don't know about. But the DEXA scan, it's a brilliant piece of technology that will tell you exactly what the state of your bones are, but most people don't have access to having one.
Yeah.
That's something I have in my lab. So I'm under a research umbrella, I'm able to offer people DEXA scans, and people just want to know what's going
Yeah.
on, and then they want to know what they can do. And of course, there's always options that exist in pharmacology, and they will be offered to you through that system. And that's great, but that's not for everyone. Some people want to just know, what can I do just from a
Prevention is better as well, I
that's
always
right. What
think.
can I do? What can I do with exercise? What can I do with nutrition? And I've also got risk factors that I have from choosing my parents wisely or unwisely. We know that's
Talking about parents, can you gift your app to somebody? Because I think it would make a lovely gift to give. Like, I'm thinking it's my mother's birthday
awesome.
soon, and I think it would be something that I would like to gift her. But can you gift it? Can you purchase it and give it to
Oh,
somebody
I don't know if
else?
we've got that feature on our app yet. So we've
One for
yeah,
the next
absolutely. And
round.
we're learning so much as we're going with the app, and we're getting because our expertise is in the science of it and the delivery of it and then the sharing of it. Man, that's just blown my mind. And I've learned a lot. And there's so many features that we'll add going forward. I don't know if that's possible, what you've said about gifting it, but maybe you could just
It's
get mum
possible,
to do it and just drop the money in her account and get her hooked up with it. But yeah.
and if you give me a link, I'll leave a link in the show
Okay,
notes so
great.
people who are interested can go and find out. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. Any last words that you want to say to people?
Yeah, I know that you're all about aging fabulously, and your listeners are all about that. And that's just the mantra of my life as well. I think it's just taking responsibility for how we age and just getting moving. I think whatever you do
Yeah.
is beneficial. That whole old adage of of use it or lose it is so true.
Yeah.
And we just can never feel like we can stop. If people feel like they aged enough to now just sit down and let aging happen, I think that's a terrible way to think. I think we just have to keep moving in whatever
There's,
way we
there's a
can.
fabulous there's a fabulous poster in our swimming pool which says, "You don't get old. No, sorry. You don't stop swimming when you get
Yeah,
old. You get old when you stop swimming." And I think you could apply that to anything
I
with
agree.
running or whatever it's doing, but it's exactly the
Yeah,
same. And I think even just looking after
yeah,
yourself, you
yeah.
don't like if you look after yourself, obviously we all
Yes,
age, but if we actually look after
we age
ourselves,
better.
we remain
Yeah,
vibrant.
that's right. And we owe it to ourselves to do that. For those of you that have started to age, like myself, you start to feel things changing. And so that can be a real motivator to say, I can do something about that. Don't just let aging happen to you. Just go out and be, yeah, be fabulous.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Fabulous. Other than your app, where can people find you on the
So
internet?
they can search up osteogains.com. So that is our
Yes.
our website, and we have a really awesome Instagram going now. And
What is your
our
Instagram?
Instagram is yeah, that's good. It's just Osteogains. You're asking the person who's not at that end, but Osteogains will get you to our Instagram, and you can
Perfect.
find us on the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. So there's information
Perfect.
there. People can download it straight from there, and we've got loads of
Perfect.
information, and we've got a Facebook community page, and yeah, it's going great guns because people are talking about us, and
Perfect.
yeah, we love to hear your feedback
Perfect.
as well.
Perfect. Fabulous. Thank you so
Great
much.
to talk. Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Dr. Orlena.